Hi, welcome to Coding Bootcamp's YouTube channel. Subscribe now and join our live stream session later. See you.
Hey guys, welcome to codingbootcamps.com. This is Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. I'm very excited that you're here. My name is Kostab Garge, and I am a senior mean stack developer. I have over 5 years of technology consulting experience, and I primarily focus on web technologies as well as cloud technologies. I've been working with Node.js since the past 5 years, and I have very thorough experience of implementing production level systems using Node.js and MongoDB. I hold a master's degree from Illinois Institute of Technology, and I co-founded Indica Digital, which is a Chicago-based startup with a colleague of mine from Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm also a co-founder of Pune-based IntelliFlow Systems, where we provide services on top of Azure, Microsoft Azure. And I'm also a senior instructor at High School Technology Services. I've been teaching with them since 2016, where I used to teach students from US and Canada about the full stack web development as well as cross-platform mobile application development. I don't teach cross-platform mobile application development right now. My primary focus is on the full stack web development since it is a hottest area, and I think it is very important that students actually start with the full stack web development before they jump on the cross-platform mobile development, because the underlying technologies that the cross-platform mobile development uses is that of web technology. So I'm pretty much focused on the web development aspect of it, and I'm particularly very excited about Node.js. So in this course, it is best if you understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript beforehand. Not so much about HTML and CSS. We won't be focusing more on HTML and CSS, but definitely the fundamental concepts of JavaScript, including the expressions, the literals, as well as the loops, arrays, and functions. So make sure you have good understanding of the fundamentals of JavaScript. I strongly encourage you to check my previous courses. So I have two courses on coding bootcamps. One is the basic and introduction level to JavaScript programming, as well as the advanced level JavaScript programming, which includes jQuery as well. So I strongly encourage you to check these courses and make sure you follow the social media accounts to be on track to check out my latest courses as well. All right, so in this course, what we are going to do is we are going to be covering four aspects. So first is the refresher, that is the refresher of JavaScript programming. We will make sure that we are clear on the concepts of the functions as well as arrays and other different the most important concepts that require JavaScript, right? And after that, we'll be diving into the introduction to Node.js. We'll first understand what Node.js is, what is a Node package manager, and we will cover all the fundamentals of Node.js, including the routes as well as how it was built and uh, how to do error handling. And after that, we'll jump into ExpressJS. So ExpressJS is a framework which is built on top of Node.js, in which we will be understanding how to build applications using ExpressJS, what middlewares are, what routing is, how do we connect ExpressJS application to databases, and how do we do error handling in ExpressJS. And the last section, uh, the last theoretical section will be covering MongoDB. So you will be implementing MongoDB on a cloud-based service called MongoDB Atlas. So you won't be installing MongoDB on your local system. So this will give you a like an introductory taste of a cloud-based application where you will connect your ExpressJS application that you're learning, that you have built in this course, and connect it to a cloud-based application that is hosting your database, that is the MongoDB. We'll understand the core fundamentals of MongoDB as well as we'll implement all of these in our projects. So what we'll be doing with the projects is we'll be building a RESTful API. So Node.js is pretty good for building APIs, and we will be using Express and MongoDB to build the API. Okay. In the second project, we'll be building the user authentication system using MongoDB. So this actually particularly ties in with my previous course, that is the advanced level JavaScript, where we build the login form. So if you have taken my previous course, where I teach you how to build a login form. You can connect that application to this backend application and then have a complete full stack application. Great. So in the project 3, we'll be implementing the same user authentication system, but in this case, we'll be using SQL. Okay. So SQL, as you know, is very popular database. So I definitely made sure that you have understanding of how to connect your Node.js application to SQL as well, because there are a lot of companies that use SQL. There are some startups who use NoSQL databases like MongoDB, but SQL is still popular. So the project 3 will be covering on connecting your Express applications to SQL. All right, so what do you learn by finishing this class? So in this class, we'll be focusing more on the RESTful nature of the API, the application programming interface. This is very important because application programming interface acts like a middleware, or it's a program that sits between the database and the user. Okay, so the user, if they're accessing the application using a front end, right? So if they're using Angular or React or even simple jQuery or JavaScript, they need to connect to the database and get more information from the database. So this application that we built in this course will act as a middleman, and that's what API is. API actually handles the requests and response that the front-end applications ask us, and depending on the authentication and depending on what data that they're requesting, we fetch the data from the database, clean it up, transform it based on the user requirements, and then send it to the user on the front end. So it's pretty exciting to think that we are building very interesting application using Node.js. So the follow-up courses, I definitely recommend you take Angular, React, and Vue.js courses. So these are the front-end applications that I was talking about a few moments ago, where you can build very good user experiences for your end users, where they can get the data from the Node.js applications that we are building in this course and then make it pretty, or make a way to organize it and display it to the user so that they have a good user experience. All right, so thank you for taking the time. I hope you take this course, and I will see you in the next session. Take care. Hey guys, welcome to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. It's great to have you here. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So first, I'd like to welcome you to the course. Congratulations on taking the first step to becoming a Node.js developer. We now know that Node.js is one of the most important technology to develop cloud-based systems. You will learn how to build API applications which serve the request for front-end systems. Any front-end system like web app or a mobile app can connect to the application which you will learn to build. My name is Kaustubh Gharge, but you can call me KG. I'm a senior coding instructor at Coding Bootcamps. I'm also co-founder of two startups, Indica Digital and IntelliFlow Systems. Indica Digital is based in Chicago. We provide digital strategy and implementation to entrepreneurs, small and medium enterprises. And we also have a special focus on mortgage technology, where we help independent mortgage lenders with their technology stack. My other startup, IntelliFlow Systems, is fairly new and is based in Pune, India, where I manage highly specialized technology team which builds digital products and services. I also hold double masters in both information technology and management. So this course is made up of two parts: concepts and projects. Concepts are covered through lectures in multiple sessions. Concept sessions are accompanied by hands-on projects. Each project is covered in one session. By the end of this course, you would be able to apply the concepts to actual projects. Okay, so how will you follow this course? So there are 4 steps. Watch concept sessions 2 times and make notes to get familiar with concepts and terminologies. Step 2 is write codes and build project while watching the project videos by following my tips and codes. Step 3 is read the project documents to understand code and programming concepts discussed in the video. And the last step is to build project again from scratch by doing it all by yourself. And to reinforce your training, I suggest you repeat step 4 at least twice or thrice. Alright, so the projects that we'll be covering in this particular course are, the first one is we'll be developing a RESTful API using Express and MongoDB. Express is a framework of Node.js. There's a link I have provided here. I don't have screenshot attached since it's a backend project and we don't have any screenshots, so you may ignore that. The next project is building a user authentication system in which we will allow user to enter their username or email address and their password, and we'll verify those two details and allow them to log in into the system. And we'll be using MongoDB as our database. In the final project, we'll be using the same application that we built previously, but instead of using MongoDB, we will learn on how to use SQL. The concepts will be the same. We just have to figure out how to make sure we connect with the database and make sure we exchange the data in the right format. So the requirements for this course are: you need to have a computer with Mac OS or Windows 10 or any Linux operating system with a good internet connection, and you need to understand the fundamentals of programming. You need to also have basic programming knowledge of JavaScript because I won't be covering the very fundamental concepts which are actually very essential for you to learn Node.js. So let's do a quick refresher of JavaScript. In this session, I'll be just focusing on the quick refresher for JavaScript, as well as we'll learn on how to install Node.js. So the first thing is we'll be covering some of these concepts in detail. Some of them will just it's for you to make sure that you brush up on these because these are used heavily throughout this course. So scope determines the accessibility of variables. So like for example, if you declare a variable in the start of your JavaScript file, that variable will be accessible through all of the programs that you write, all of the functions that you write in below, right? So that's the scope that is called a global scope. So what if you write a variable inside a function? What kind of scope do you think it has? Right, it has a local scope because that function, that variable will be accessed by only the that function. It won't be accessible outside. Arrow functions. So arrow functions were introduced in ECMAScript 6, and we use pretty heavily with Node.js, as you will see when we start working on the projects. It's just a way of writing the normal function syntax a bit shorter. So here's a distinction between a regular function and a arrow function. In arrow function, you just assign an anonymous function to a variable, and it always returns something back. Loop. Now this is a fundamental programming concept that you should be aware of. I won't be covering loops or arrays in detail. This is just a quick refresher of what we will expect in this course. So you need to be familiar with for, while, and do while loops. So for is you loop through a block of code a number of times. You specify the number of times, and it will run for that specific number of times, that block of code. In the while loop, what we do is unless and until the condition is true, the loop will keep on running. Okay, and in do while, even if the condition is false, the loop will at least run once. Okay. So these are the loops. Make sure you have good grasp of this because you'll be using this throughout the course, as well as you'll be. This is basic programming concepts. You need them either way. Semicolons. Okay, semicolons are like full stops for your expressions. Same way English language has full stop to make sure that the sentence has ended. We have semicolons in programming languages, especially in JavaScript. Where we denote that the expression has ended. These are not mandatory in JavaScript, since JavaScript is an interpreted language, but it's always a good practice to end your expressions with semicolons. Comments. There are two ways to write up comments: multi-line and single-line comments. Now I like to write multi-line comments to demonstrate what I'm going to be writing. So like for example,
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
if I'm writing a functionality of adding a new user into the system, before I start writing function for that specific functionality, I will mention in a multi-line comment what the code will be in the next few lines. In the single line comments, I usually try to avoid that, but only and only if necessary, where it is very hard for a reader to understand what you have written. At that point, I will actually add a single line comment. So literal is any value that is written in source code. So like example, you have number, string, or boolean. Expressions is a code that has to be evaluated to a value. So for example, in this case, 300 greater than 19, it evaluates to a Boolean value of true. They can be further classified according to their type, such as Boolean, string, or arithmetic. Types, we know one thing about JavaScript, that it is interpreted language. And if you assign a variable a number, it will interpret as a type of number. There's no specific type setting that is available in JavaScript. That we have to be very careful about this. Otherwise, it can cause serious problems as the code grows more complex. But JavaScript variables can hold multiple data types and are very dynamic. This is a very good thing and a bad thing. It's a boon and a curse. So make sure you understand what you're doing with types. Variables, again, it's a basic programming concepts where variables are containers for storing your data values. So in this case, for example, you have declared a variable of length equal to 100. That means the variable length will store the value 100. Functions, again, this is again a very important concept, because JavaScript is a functional programming language, and if you don't understand functions, then you won't understand Node.js, or you won't have a good grasp on Node.js. So JavaScript function is a block of code designed to perform a particular task. So like for example, if I were to add two numbers, it will take input of two numbers, do the addition, and return a result. Okay. Array is a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. So for example, you have array of objects, you have array of numbers, you have array of strings. We'll be dealing with arrays a lot in this course, and when you build very complex systems using Node.js, where you get data from the database, and also you want to send the data to the front end, you'll be using arrays a lot. Alright, so let's move on to the setup. Alright, so let's talk about system setup. So what you need to do is you need to go to this specific link, nodejs.org, and download the appropriate package for your system. So if you go to that specific link, you will see this web page, and depending on what kind of system you're using, if it's a Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, you'll have to download the appropriate package. Make sure you also look at the system architecture for your specific system and download that appropriate package. I have already installed this on my computer, so I'm not going to be installing Node.js again. But there are other ways you can install Node.js for very system-specific, using very system-specific tools, and we'll see them in a moment. You can also use a tool called Node Version Manager, which allows you to install multiple versions of Node. The reason we use Node Version Manager is because of the compatibility for certain applications. So for example, if you have an application that is built using, let's say, version 1.2, and right now the latest version of Node is about version 12. So if you want to operate the dependencies and packages and the modules that only use Node version 1.2, you'll have to have that specific version installed on your system. And Node Version Manager is an easier way of managing different versions on your system. So The way you can install Node Version Manager is you can just go to a new Google search and you can type in Node Version Manager. You get a GitHub link. That's the first link. You can select it, and you can follow the install instructions that are given over here, and you can install Node Version Manager. All right, moving on. Now, the resources that I was talking about. So for Mac OS, Homebrew is a perfect tool to manage Node.js installation. For Windows 10, we have Chocolatey, and for Ubuntu, we have apt-get. For different distributions of Linux, there will be different installers, but apt-get is specific for the Debian-based Linux distributions. For Windows 10, you can use Chocolatey. That is usually available through the PowerShell. And for Mac OS, of course, you have Homebrew. All you have to do is follow the Homebrew package guide and install Node.js. The next thing you need to install is Visual Studio Code. So we will be coding our applications in a code editor, and I recommend using Visual Studio Code. You can use Sublime Text or even simple Notepad. That is fine. But the reason I encourage Visual Studio Code is because it has an inbuilt terminal, and it's quite easy to work with. So this is the current setup that I'm using. I'm using the Mac operating system. The Node.js version is version 12, and the code editor that I'm using is Visual Studio Code. So what have we learned in this session? So we have learned the programming basics. We did a refresher on JavaScript programming basics that are very important, and we're going to be using them quite a while in the upcoming sessions. And we also learn how to set up our system. In the next session, we will be learning about what Node.js is and why does it exist, and what is NPM and how to use NPM. So I will see you in the next session. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey guys, welcome to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. I'm a senior coding instructor at Coding Bootcamps, and we will be covering session 2 of this course today. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, first we'll be doing a refresher of essential concepts. First we'll refresh our memories of essential concepts needed to grasp Node.js. We'll cover asynchronous programming, callbacks, timers, promises, async and await, closures, and the event loop. You must already know this with the JavaScript course, but it's important that we refresh our understanding of these concepts. Next, we'll learn what is Node.js and why does it exist. We'll learn what NPM is and how we can manage different packages and dependencies for our project. We'll also cover the fundamentals of Node.js programming and error handling. All right, so let's begin by looking at some of the essential concepts. So we'll be covering these following points: asynchronous programming and callbacks, timers, promises, async and await, closures, and the event loop. Let's begin by asynchronous programming. JavaScript is synchronous by nature, and it runs on a single thread, which means it cannot execute code in parallel. Lines of code are executed one after another. So like for example, let's say you have 3 variables, variable A, variable B, and variable C. All of these lines, and when they're added into a function, will be executed one at a time. However, to get asynchronous capability, the environment in which the programming language runs can be manipulated. This is exactly what Node.js was able to do. Node.js introduced a non-blocking I/O environment to extend the concept of asynchronous programming. This improves the system efficiency and throughput. One of the better ways of implementing asynchronous programming is a callback in JavaScript. Callbacks is a asynchronous equivalent of a function, a callback, a simple function that's passed as a value to another function and will only be executed when specific event happens. So you may have worked on JavaScript code to manipulate the DOM, which would look something like this. Let me go inside the console and write it down. All right, so let's say you have document.get element by ID, in which you pass in the button and you attach the event listener to this with a event of click and a function that has been passed into it. So whenever the user clicks on the button and the event listener listens to the click event, the callback function is executed. A few other examples of timer functions which you may have used while learning JavaScript or jQuery. We'll see them in the next slide. So the first one is set timeout. You may have used this to execute a block of code after a stipulated time period. So the best example of this is set timeout, and within this we pass in a function. Oops, let me fix this real quick. All right, and you pass in the time. So I passed in 2000 milliseconds, and this is the block of code that will be executed. All right, here if you notice, we have a callback function that is passed in the set timeout function, which will run after the set timeout function executes after the given time parameter, which is 2000 milliseconds. That is 2 seconds. And this particular block of code will be executed after 2000 milliseconds. So let's actually add a console.log here. All right, so if you notice, it logged out hello world. All right, so we'll quickly refresh our memory with other timer functions that JavaScript provides. So one of them is set interval. With this built-in function, you can set interval of time for running a block of code. So I'm just going to refactor the existing code that I have. So instead of set timeout, I will have set interval, and instead of 2000 milliseconds, let's have 3000 milliseconds. All right, so the hello world will be displayed every 3 seconds. Perfect. Set immediate. So when you want to execute some piece of code asynchronously, but as soon as possible, one option is to use the set immediate function provided by the Node.js. It is similar to set timeout, but it's best to use set immediate to run a piece of code asynchronously as soon as possible. So promises. Promises are very important in JavaScript. Make sure you understand this very thoroughly, because you will be using this in advanced JavaScript, and especially in various JavaScript frameworks such as Node.js, as well as the front-end frameworks such as Angular. Promise is commonly defined as a proxy for a value that will eventually become available. So imagine you're a kid and your dad promises you that he will take you camping next week. So now you don't know if he'll go to the camping. Your dad can take you camping, or he might not take you camping because he might be busy, right? So that's a promise. A promise has 3 states. So let me go back in here real quick and open up the console. So a promise has three states. The first is pending. The next one is fulfilled. And the last one is rejected.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Okay, so pending is that you don't know if you'll go to camping. Fulfilled means your dad takes you to camping because he's not busy. Okay, the not busy is a condition that we have to check. The rejected, that means your dad does not take you to camping because he's busy, right? So let's write some code for this. Let's codify this. So I'll just clear this console out, and I'll declare a variable to see if dad is busy. So I'll say is dad busy. So currently he's not busy. And let me create a new promise. So this is how you create a new promise. I'll declare a variable, take me camping, and this will either be fulfilled or not fulfilled. Will take me camping, this promise. So I'll say new promise, and inside this we pass in a function. So I'll say function resolve reject. Okay, so just ignore this, I just accidentally pressed enter right here. In this we have to see if dad is busy. So I'll say if dad is busy. So I'll say if dad is not busy, and in here I'm going to, if dad is not busy, then we are going camping, right? So I'll create a object for camping which will have all the information about camping. So I'll say where we are going. So let's say we are going into the state of Wisconsin. The time, say we are going at 10 a.m. The day, say we're going on Sunday, and that is it. Okay, now since dad is not busy, we are definitely going to camping. So I'm just going to resolve this request. That means the request has been fulfilled. So resolve camping. So that means the request has been fulfilled. And if dad is busy, then we have to give a reason because dad is busy. So I'll just say var reason equals new error. I'm just going to throw an error, and the reason is dad is busy. And I'm going to reject this with a reason. So which means we are not going to camping. Okay. So this is how you create a promise. And if I now see if will dad take me camping, the promise is resolved because dad is not busy, and that's why we're going, right? But what if dad is busy? So if I say and I create this again, then I get an error. I get an error saying that dad is busy, so we are not going camping today. Great. Let's go back. Async and await is special syntax to work with promises in a much more easier fashion. This is a way of defining the promises and handling the reject and resolve. You won't be covering this in detail because this is still an introduction to JavaScript, but as we move on to the advanced level, we'll definitely go in detail for async and await. So closure. A closure is a function that has access to its outer function scope even after the outer function has returned. Okay, so what does that mean? So let me go back here real quick, clear this out, and explain what this means. So let us say we declare a variable, and I say world. In here, I will say, I'll declare a function called hello. I'll say hello. And in here, let me log out. Now, what closure means is closure is a function that has access to its outer function scope even after the outer function has returned. So that means we have access to the outer scope, right? So the outer scope in this case is variable a, right? So if I just say a and just run this function, so I'll say hello, I got hello world. Great. So promises were introduced to solve the famous callback help problem, but they introduced complexity of their own and also the syntax complexity. There were good primitives around which a better syntax could be exposed to developers. So when the time was right, we got a sync function. They make the code look like it's synchronous, but it's asynchronous and non-blocking behind the scenes. If you use async keyword before the function definition, you can use the await within the function. When you await a promise or await a promise, the function, oops, my mistake. The function is paused in a non-blocking way until the promise settles. If the promise fulfills, you get the value back. If the promise rejects, the rejected value is thrown. Consider the following code that I have typed in the console right here. So if you look at the first function here, it is using promises to make a request to the server, the GET request to the server, and get the data in JSON. Okay, and then according to the promise syntax, we're using the .then method and collecting the result. So consider if you were to be using some sort of function that does data transformation on the results, then you would have chaining of promises, right? So the code would just grow on and it would look complicated. So understanding where the promise is and where the error is. But in case of async and await, we use the async keyword before calling in the function. If you can see the comparison here. And since we use the async keyword, we can use the await keyword and have as many await keywords as we can within this fixed async function. So in here, the code looks much more cleaner than what we have here. All right, so that's it. Event loop. The event loop is what allows Node.js to perform non-blocking I/O operations, despite the fact that JavaScript is single-threaded, by offloading operations to the system whenever possible. Since most of the modern systems are multi-threaded, they can handle multiple operations executing in the background. So when one of the operation completes, the system tells Node.js so that the appropriate callback may be added into the queue and eventually be executed. All right, so Alright, so what is a Node.js? Node.js is an open source JavaScript runtime environment that runs on the V8 JavaScript engine provided by the Chromium project. For many years, JavaScript was strictly a front-end language that was used to manipulate the document object model. However, with Node.js, JavaScript became a server-side language, which means it can handle API requests and build server-side applications. It uses non-blocking event-driven model. So what does that mean? I know this is a bit confusing, but this is one of the main reasons for Node.js's existence. So let's look at why Node.js exists. Okay, so if you have experience with backend technologies, you'll quickly understand why non-blocking I/O is a big deal. I'm going to give an example of PHP-based application for backend. When a front-end makes request to PHP-based application, each connection or request starts a new process that has to be processed, which means that the physical resource such as CPU, the CPU power, will have to process each one of these requests one at a time. However, when you have too many requests, it can put pressure on the limited compute and the memory resources, which actually maxes out the memory load. This may result in slow performance or system crash. However, with Node.js application, it runs in a single process without creating a thread for every request. Node.js runtime environment provides a set of asynchronous I/O primitives in its standard library that prevents the JavaScript code from blocking. When Node.js needs to perform an I/O operation, like let's say reading from a network or accessing a database or a file system, instead of blocking the thread and wasting the CPU cycles, Node.js will actually resume the operation when the response comes back. This allows Node.js to handle thousands of concurrent connections with a single server without introducing the burden of managing concurrency, which could be a significant source of bugs. So if we were to sum it up, the most significant difference between Node.js and PHP is that most functions in PHP block until the completion. That means the command only executes after the previous command finishes. While in Node.js, the functions are non-blocking. That means the commands execute concurrently or even in parallel and use the callback functions that we learned in the previous slides, to just signal the completion or failure of the previous commands. All right, moving on. So NPM, what is NPM? NPM stands for Node Package Manager. It is the standard package manager for Node.js. NPM manages downloads for dependencies of our projects. It also makes it easier for us as JavaScript developers to share and reuse the code. When you install Node.js, you also install NPM command line utility for installing and managing the NPM packages. We'll be using it quite extensively to handle our dependencies. So managing dependency with NPM. Let's look at NPM website real quick. So if you go to npmjs.com, here you can find the packages or modules which we can use to build our application. For example, if I were to write a code in Node.js for starting a server, I have two options. Either I can write the basic module, which Node.js provides, or I can use a module that has been written and maintained by other developers. I can even publish my own module on this site. So let's look up a package which we can use. Let's say we want to convert some data which we have in XML format into JSON format. So if you have worked with PHP applications before, or even front-end applications using JavaScript or jQuery, you already know what JSON is. You already know what XML is. So if you want to convert the XML data into JSON format, I can find a package here. So if I go over to the search bar and search for XML to JSON, it should show me a package. So here's the page for that package with all the documentation and how you can install and how you can use it. It also provides further documentation, as well as it gives you a link for the repository where the source code is stored. And here it gives you the weekly downloads for this package. Who else is using this package? Okay, I can install this as a dependency for my project. We'll be installing some of the packages from NPM in the next session. So Express is one of the most popular modules we'll be installing, which allows us to create RESTful Node.js applications easily. However, for this session, to keep things simple, we'll be working with packages which are already provided by Node.js, which were installed when you install Node.js. So these packages are part of the core installation. So let's turn over to the command line and take a look at NPM. Okay, so you need to open up a command line terminal and simply type in NPM. All right, so here we will see all possible commands which can be used. So here's a list of commands. We can also have help section available. So here's the two commands to look for further help. and has a quick help command over here, and that's one of the flag attributes that we can use to understand more about the command. And let's actually look at npm itself. So let me type in npm
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
help npm. All right, so here's the documentation that I get for npm. And if you read through this, we can understand how to use npm and how to install packages. Okay, it gives you the current version number, and it gives you a basic syntax of how the npm command or the npm utility works. Okay, npm can also be used for initializing the node application. The command we use is npm init. Init is for initialization. So let's look at the help documentation for this command. So let me close this out, and if you notice here, it says npm command -h. Okay, or we can use this following format as well. So npm help and the command name. So let me try using this. I'll say npm help init. All right, so here it shows us which parameters we can use with this command, and most importantly, it states here that we can create a package.json file. So package.json file is stored at the root directory of the project and holds all the information about the application. So for example, name, author, dependencies, development dependencies, and scripts. Okay, so let's quickly initialize a new project and see how package.json files are created. So let me close this out. Let me clear this, and let me actually create a demo here. So I'll say session 2. All right, so inside session 2, let me go ahead and create this package.json file. So how do you create it? You first initialize the npm project or the node project. So we'll be using npm init. Okay, so I'll just type in npm init. Okay, so if you read this, it states that this utility walks you through the creating of package.json file. It only covers the most common items and tries to guess the sensible defaults. So it's asking us for what is the package name. So let's say this is test package. Okay, it asks us what is the version number, so we can decide what this version number of this package is going to be. I'm just going to press enter to select this default version number. Okay, it asks us for the description of the package, what kind of description we'd like to provide. So I'll just say this is a test package. It asks us for the entry point. That's the main file that will hold the application. So when you start the application using npm utility, it is going to be first looking for this specific file. So it gives us a default file name. So it says index.js. Index.js, mind you, does not exist at the moment. It is giving us a suggestion. I'm just going to select it. I'm going to create a index.js file. Okay, this is the test command if we have any test runners installed. So it asks us what is the test command to test the application that we have written. I'm just going to press the return key. I don't have anything. It asks us for the Git repository URL. I'm not going to be storing this at a Git repository, so I'm just going to press an enter. This is keywords. So keywords are essential if we publish this package on npmjs.org, npmjs.com, and there it'll be easier for other people to find our packages. So it asks us for keywords. We don't have to put anything at the moment, so I'm just going to press enter. The author. So this is the author of the project. Sometimes the intellectual property of the code is of the companies or the specific coder. So in our case, let's say I'm the author of the package because I'm writing the code. It asks us for the license. So there are various licenses available. I'm just going to select the basic one, but you can do more research on the licensing of the code if you want to publish it. This is particularly important if you want to publish the code and allow other people to use it. All right, so it gives us a quick overview of the package.json file that will be created, and it asks us, is this okay? And the default is yes. So if I just press enter, it will say, it will save this. So I'll just press enter. All right, so it created a package.json file. So if I type in ls, it will show me that the package.json file was created. All right, so let's quickly open this up in Visual Studio Code. And select this. All right, so now when you create the package.json file, it will hold all the information for the dependency modules and packages as well. Okay, so when you use npm install to install dependencies for your project, like for example, we discussed before, so you want to have XML to JSON package as a dependency for our project, then we have either two options. Okay, either to install the dependency globally or locally. For globally, you will have to type in, so let me open up a terminal within this Visual Studio Code itself. So if we want to install the package globally, all we have to do is we will have to say npm install the package name, and I'll have to type in the flag of G. G stands for global. Okay, so it will create a global node underscore modules folder which will be accessible to all of the node applications in your system. Or you can create locally, which we'll see in a moment, where the folder which holds these packages, that is the node underscore modules folder, will be created in the application folder itself. So the application folder is session 2 right now, and the node modules folder will be created here. Okay, so let's install this package and see how that looks. So the package that we wanted, that we looked at npmjs.com before, was XML to JSON. So I'll just say XML to JSON, and that's it. I'm not going to type in the flag of G. I don't want to install it globally. I want to see it locally. So I'm just going to install it, and if I use the flag of -- save, it is going to add this within my package.json script as well. So I'm just going to press enter. So it installs the package. It will take some time here. Okay, so it gave me an error. It says the dependency tools are not available. Okay, I'm going to install some basic package here. So let's see if we have hello world available instead of this. All right, let me type in -hello world. All right. All right, so I'm going to install this package. I don't think it will require any detailed dependencies like this XML to JSON requires, for which I don't have Xcode installed on my computer at the moment. So I'm just going to avoid this package for now, and I'm going to say npm install hello world and save. All right, it will take some time to install this package. I don't know how big this is. Okay, this was completed. So let me select here, and if you can see, it created a folder called node_modules, and it installed all the dependencies. Okay, so all of the packages that you install for your application will be added into this node_modules folder. Okay, and here it is, hello-world. All right, perfect. And if you look at the package.json file, since I typed in -- save, it added the hello world into the dependencies section of this file. So that means this is a dependency for this project. All right, moving on to the next slide. NPM scripts. So NPM scripts allow us to create small utilities to automate some of the tasks. For example, if you want to test an application, you can write a NPM script using popular testing libraries available on, again, npmjs.com, and test your application by simply typing npm test. You can also create custom scripts and use them. We'll write a simple start script in one of the projects that we'll be working on in this course. But now let's actually create a Node.js application within this directory where we have created this package.json file. So let me actually create a folder, and since we have said that the main file will be index.js, I'm just going to create this file. And within, let's do basic console.log here, and we'll say hello world from, let's say, coding bootcamps. All right, let me save this, close this. All right, and now if we have to run this application, what we can do is we can just type in node and the file name. So the file name is index.js, so I'm just going to type in index.js. And it gives us a result. It says, hello world from coding bootcamps. Let me clear this out so you can see clearly. So I'll just say node index.js, type it. And I just logged out. So congratulations, this is the first Node.js application that we have created. Perfect. So let's quickly now go back to the slides, and we will move on to the fundamentals of Node.js programming. All right, so understanding modules. So once we start developing complex Node.js applications, we'll be dividing up our code into various different files based on the functionality. For example, let's say we want to perform arithmetic operations, arithmetic functions, then we can separate all of our arithmetic operations in a single file and then use them throughout the application, or even share amongst different Node.js applications that we're building. This file will with a fixed functionality can be a module. So modularization is important as the application grows complex. We need modules that will handle only specific part of the application. For example, database operations can be handled by the separate module, or the arithmetic operations we talked about earlier can be a part of utilities module or service module. With modularization, there needs to have a way of organizing your code within the application. Now, there is no concrete way of organizing your code. However, I'd like to structure the code based on functionality. For example, if you're building a RESTful application, I'll have the routes directory, which will have the modules that handle all my routes, or services directory, which will have service modules, and so on. We'll utilize this structure when we work on our projects later in this course. But let's talk about sharing modules first. Now, what good is creating modules if we are not going to use them later? There's no point in creating isolated modules, right? In order to use this again in the code, we'll be using require exports and module.exports. So say we write the module that handles all the arithmetic operations, then we need to make that module public and export it. And module.exports is a great way of exporting its functionality. So let's move back here and let's write a single arithmetic operation of addition. So for it, let's create a new file called, let's say, addition.js. Okay, so in here I'm just going to create a function for addition of two numbers. So I'll say const add numbers, and I'm going to use the ES6 way, and I'm just going to return the addition. So let's say I have two numbers, 1 plus 3. All right, I'm just going to return this. That's it. So this is just one function. So if I have to export this functionality, what I can do is I can say exports.add numbers and export this as a name. So let me say add numbers. All right, so now in our main file, we have to import this module by using the require keyword. Okay, so let me go here and let me make some space. And in here, I'm going to create, first of all, a variable to store this. So I'll say add, and I'll say require. And here, I will pass in the path of this addition. Okay, so if you notice,
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
Visual Studio Code automatically gave us the file name. So I'm just going to select it, and I'm going to save it. All right. So now let's log this out. Let's log this, the result of this. Okay. So I will say console.log. Use backticks. I'll say result. And in here, I'm going to call in the add numbers method from this module, the add module. So I'm going to use this variable that we have declared to store the addition. So I'll say add numbers. All right, and since it's a function, I'll just use the parentheses. Put a semicolon and save it. Now let's run this application and see. The result should be 4. Okay, so since we have 1 plus 3, the result should be 4. Let's quickly test this out. So let me clear this again and make some space here so that you guys can see. So I'll say, oops, not here, over here. Okay, node index.js. All right, so it says result is 4. Okay, so we just got the arithmetic operation functionality from the addition module. Okay, and we also have the previous console.log. So good. Now let's move on to using some of the modules that Node.js provides us. All right. So the FS and path module. So FS stands for file system. So one of the modules that is provided within the Node.js runtime is the file system and the path module. So the FS module provides functionality to access and manipulate the file system. The path module provides a lot of very useful functionality to access and interact with the file system. So let's actually understand this through code. So let me move back here, and I'm going to create a new project here. Okay. So I'm just going to close this out. And let's first talk about. I'm going to be using this project only, so I'm not going to create a new project. So let's create a new file called, let's say, fs.js. All right, so I'm just going to declare a variable, and I'm going to require fs. Okay, if you notice this, it did not give me an error, and I did not have to install this module. The reason is that this is one of the core modules that Node.js provides. Okay, so I'm going to read a file. So let's read one of these files that we have already created. So it provides us with a read file method. It's say asynchronous method. So I'm just going to say read file. So if you notice, it automatically pops up. And the file I'm going to read is, let's say, index.js. The format, we have to provide a file format. Okay, so if you look at here, it says path, that is string, and format as well as a callback function. Okay, so I'm just going to say utf-8. And have a callback function. So if there's an error, we throw an error. If we find data, then we show the data. Okay, so let me first handle the error. So if error, then throw error. So don't worry about the error handling at the moment. We'll be covering that in the later part of this session itself. Just focus on the data. So let me save this. Now let me run this. So I'll just say node and the file name. So I created a new file. So I'll just say fs.js. And if I save this, okay, let me clear this out and make some space more. So say Node.js. Okay, so what it did was it read our index.js file, since we have added it as the path of the file, and it printed out the data that it read from it. So that's the file. It's perfect. Now let's talk about path.js. Okay, so for example, let me create a new file here real quick. I'm going to call this path.js. Okay, and I'm going to be using the path module. So I'll just say var path equals require path. Again, I did not have to install this module or write code for it. It is one of the core modules that Node.js provides. And now let's figure out the file name. Okay, so let's say file name path.base name. So this is one of the methods that is provided with the path object, and we will use one of these files. So let's say index.js again. Let's use index.js. All right, and let me log this out. Save this. Clear this. Make some space, and let me run this. What was the name of the file again? It was path.js. So I'll just say path.js, and it gave me the file name. So perfect. That's it. That's how we can use path. All right, so moving on. So we did the demo code for the file system and the path module. Now let's move on towards the HTTP module. Let's look at another module for HTTP. So this allows our application to use the HTTP network connection. So let's actually quickly build a simple HTTP based Node.js server to understand this. Okay, so let me quickly go back here and let me write a server. All right, so I'm just going to create a server.js file, and within here I'm going to be using that HTTP module. So I'll just say const HTTP equals require HTTP. All right, so what are the core functionalities of a server, right? So we have a host name and a port, right? So let me define a host name. So I'll just say const host name equals, I'm going to be using the local host, so I'll just say 127.0.0.1, and the port I'm going to be using is 3000. I'm sure there's nothing running on 3000, but let me try that anyway. And now I'm going to be creating a instance of a server, so I'll just say const server equals, now I'm going to be I'm going to be creating an instance of HTTP server. So let me say http.createServer. This is one of the methods it provides us. And for this, we have to pass in a function with request and response. So request and response. And within here, I'm going to be sending a response of status code, setting a header, as well as displaying some information. Okay, so let me say response.status code. Since the connection was successful, I'm going to be sending status code of 200. I'm going to be setting the header, and in here I'm going to be setting the content type of text plain. So I'll just say content type. So if you were sending or interacting with JSON data, it would have been application /JSON. Since you'll be working simply with the text, you'll see why we are working with the text. I'm just going to send hello world. That's it. Nothing more. You want to keep it simple. All right, perfect. Now we want to listen on the port that we have created and the host name as well. So we'll say server.listen, and I'm going to be using the port, host name, and the callback function. And let's quickly log out, because how will we know that the server has started? So let's say console.log at, let's say, HTTP, and I'm going to be using this host name and port name. So this value can change. So that's why I've actually stored this in a variable. This value can change depending on where you're running the application. So I'm going to be saying host name and the port. All right, perfect. So I think this looks good. Let me close the other files. We don't need them. Let me make sure everything is correct. So we are not sending any requests. So if you notice this, this has not turned bold yet. So I think the code looks fine. I don't see any errors. Let me go ahead and run this. All right, perfect. So it says server running at HTTP, the local host port, the host name, and the port of 3000. So perfect. So what HTTP module gives us is the ability to make connections using the HTTP protocol. Okay. All right, perfect. So let's move on. So we created the HTTP server, and now let's talk about error handling. Error handling. Let's look at error handling. Usually it is a best approach to divide all the errors into broad categories. This is according to Join, which is a company. It is one of the stewards of the Node.js project and have contributed extensively to its code base. Okay, so there are two categories. One is the operational errors, which represent runtime problems experienced by the programs. These are not bugs actually, so these are usually problems with something else like the system itself, or with the system's configuration, or the network, or the remote service. Okay, so some of the examples can be failure to connect to a server, or failure to resolve a host name, or sometimes even invalid user input. Okay, and the second broad category is the programmer errors. So these are the bugs that we code in. Okay, so these are the things that can always be avoided by changing the code. They can never be handled properly, since by definition the code in question itself is broken. So a few of the examples would be we get undefined read property, or we have an asynchronous function without a callback, or sometimes an object is passed where an IP address string was expected. Sometimes the URL is wrong. Sometimes the file that we are trying to read does not exist. So actually we are going to cover this in a short while. So let's move on to the code so that we can see how errors can occur. All right, so I have my Visual Studio Code open. In here I have created a new file called errorhandling.js, and in here I'm going to create a program wherein I will be reading from a file system. Okay, so I'm going to be using the file system module that we have used before. So let me write up the code before, and then we can discuss. So I'll say read file. In here I need to give it a path and a callback function. All right, and here I'll be handling the error and the result. All right, so as you can see in this code, we are trying to read a file from a file system using the file system module here. This we covered a few minutes ago. So we have our callback function, which is the error first. So if you notice, the first parameter here is the error, which means the first result that it will return is the error.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
There is one, okay? That's why we need to do the first thing is to check if there is an error, and depending on what kind of error it is, we need to handle it, which is why we have an if block here to check if there is an error. So let's run this code. I'm going to save this one more time. Open up the terminal. Now let's run this code and see if we get an error, because which we should, because the path name is wrong. There is no path called /path, okay, and there is no file on this path, so this is wrong. So we'll definitely get an error. So I will just say node error handling, and I get an error. It says that no such file or directory and open -path. Okay, so this is a distinct error that I got. So this is the error that we got here. So just to show you that this is what's being executed, I'm gonna say there was an error reading the file. All right, let me run that again. All right, so we got this. There was an error reading the file, and the undefined is the second console log which we have kept outside of error, outside of the if block. I'm sorry. And in here, this is definitely undefined because we are not getting anything back. All right, so now that we can further add return keyword if the if statement were to stop. So what we can do is we can just say return and it will stop right here so that it won't execute any further. So if I run this again, let me save this and run this. So if you notice here, the undefined was not logged out because it stopped right within its tracks. Okay, we added the return keyword. Okay, so there you go. This is how you handle errors in Node.js. Now, if you're getting the data from the HTTP request, which we'll see definitely in one of the projects or a couple of the projects, the error handling in that case will be different. So instead of getting an error which says that the file not found, we might get an HTTP error like access denied or connection lost. And depending on what kind of error it is, we'll have to handle it and show the appropriate message in the log so that we can further troubleshoot it. So always remember that always remember to handle your errors and before dealing with data from the callbacks. This is error first format that Node.js callbacks use. All right, so I think we're good with errors. Let's go back to the slides. Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. So in this session, we're going to be covering ExpressJS, the features and the fundamental concepts of ExpressJS, as well as installation of ExpressJS. ExpressJS is a framework that is built on Node.js, which will be used to create HTTP application servers. Let's do a quick recap of what we learned in the previous two sessions. In the first session, we covered the advanced fundamental concepts of JavaScript, including the promises, callbacks, and async and await. In the second session, we learned what Node.js is, how to install Node.js, how to use npm, which is the Node package manager, which we'll be using to install ExpressJS as a application dependency. And in this session, we're going to be building on top of that foundational layer that we learned in Node, and we will be building a application using Express framework. So what is ExpressJS? Express is a minimal and flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a robust set of features for web and mobile applications. So in simplest terms, ExpressJS is a set of tools that we use to build HTTP servers. Node.js does this out of the box, or rather Node.js does not do this out of the box, because Node is just an environment, it's just a foundation. But what Express gives us is the access to both incoming and outgoing web traffic, and also allows us to build the request and response for this web traffic. Okay, it is a unopinionated framework. What it means is it does not force you to use any templating engine for the front end, as well as it does not enforce any object related mapping database for the backend. Okay, so it does not force you to use any specific database. You can use MySQL or Mongoose or MongoDB depending on your preference, which in fact we will be covering in project 2 and project 3. And it also allows you to use any sort of front-end technology with it. So for example, you can use Angular or REST or React.js as front-end. Why is this important? Is because it gives you the freedom and it gives you a modular way of templating. Okay. The most important concept where ExpressJS will be used is to create the backend applications. So consider a use case of creating a e-commerce application like Amazon, where you as a user search for products on their website, and when you send that request for the particular product that you want in a particular size and particular color, that request is handled by a backend application. So consider this application is to be built on Node.js, where the framework that we can use to build this application can be ExpressJS, which will take this request from the client, that is the client's browser, and look up for the relevant information in the database which is associated with. Okay, so let's consider the case for database as MongoDB. It will look at the product with the specific size and the color, and it will fetch it and display it to the user. So ExpressJS, or the application that we built on ExpressJS in this case, acts as a middleman for the front end as well as the database. So let's look at some of the features of ExpressJS. So ExpressJS allows us to create single page, multi-page, and hybrid mobile and web applications. So when you think of the previous example that I gave you about e-commerce, that was just for the web application, it can be used to create mobile applications as well. So consider an example like Uber or Lyft or Uber Eats, in which you order a cab using the phone, but the request is again sent to the backend, and the backend actually orchestrates all of the relevant pieces of information and sends the response back to your mobile applications. That backend application can be built using Node.js, and more specifically using ExpressJS. Like it said over here, it is common for building backend functions for web applications. It is also useful in building APIs, which are application programming interfaces, which we will cover in a few minutes. So let's look at the installation of ExpressJS. I'm going to move to Google Chrome browser and type in expressjs.com, where I will see the home page for ExpressJS. If you scroll down, you will see the definition for ExpressJS, and it will tell you that ExpressJS provides HTTP utility methods and middlewares to create APIs. They also tell you that Express layer provides a thin fundamental web application features. That's why allowing the application that you build to be of higher performance. They also tell you that it is one of the foundational frameworks for the other frameworks which are in the Node ecosystem. But what we are concerned right now is with the installation. So if you can see here, the portion that I'm highlighting, we're going to be needing this command only for installation of ExpressJS. You're free to look at the other links over here, but at the moment I'm going to be just concerned about installation of ExpressJS. So ExpressJS will be installed as a dependency in our Node application. Okay, so let me switch back to the Visual Studio Code Editor. Here I have created a folder, and inside which I have opened up a terminal. In here I'm going to initialize a new Node application, so I'll just say npm init, and I'm going to provide it with a flag of -- save to select all the default values. So it is going to create a package.json file which does not have dependencies just yet, but I will be installing ExpressJS as one of the application dependencies. So let me move back to expressjs.com and just copy this code over here and paste it in my terminal. Alright, so if you notice here in the package.json, it created a dependencies object which has Express and the latest version of the Express, in which in this case it is 4.17.1. And if you expand this node modules, you will find Express as one of the dependencies. Alright, so let's quickly create a new file, not inside the node modules, my mistake. And in here, let's create a simple application server. So we have already installed Express as one of the dependencies. Let me close this and make some space here. In here, I'm going to initialize Express. So I will say constant Express equals, and I'm going to require the Express module that I had just installed. So I'll type in require. And in here I'll type Express. Alright, so now that we have included Express in our application, I'm going to create a object, the instance of this application. So I'll say const app equals Express. Alright, I'm going to create a server. So a server will need a port, so I'm going to create a variable called port with value of 3000. And now what I'm going to type here, you may just ignore this for the moment. We're going to be covering that in a few minutes, but let me quickly type here. So I'll say request and response. So if you notice this is a callback function. And I'm going to type in hello world. Again, I'm going to add in a callback function. Let me log out the port real quick. Alright, instead of using double quotes, I'm going to be using these backticks. Alright, save this. And let me run this application real quick. Let's see if everything is in order. Alright, looks fine. So I'm just going to say node index.js, and it starts the server at port 3000. So we did not get any error. It logged out that the server is running on port 3000. So we have created our first application. Alright, so I made a mistake here. It's supposed to be rest.send. Alright. Okay. So we're going to be getting back in a moment here to understand what this particular code means, or even what this code means. But at this moment we have created a simple application server using ExpressJS. Alright.
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
Let's go back and look at the fundamentals of Node.js and then come back to the code real quick. So ExpressJS is used to create application programming interfaces. So you must have created APIs before in some other technology like PHP or .NET or Java. Same way we can use JavaScript to create APIs, and Node.js enables using JavaScript on the backend, on which we use ExpressJS as a framework to make our lives easier, as the developers' lives easier to create application programming interfaces. So API is a set of programming instructions and standards for accessing the web-based software application or web tool. Okay. In particular, we're going to be building RESTful APIs. REST is representational state transfer. It is a software architectural style that defines a set of constraints that are used to create web services. So we are going to be using REST API architecture, and we are going to be using HTTP methods to implement this architecture. So HTTP method is commonly used as verbs. So if I move back to the code now and explain this to you real quick. So in here I have initialized the application for Express, and I have used a verb called get. Okay, so this triggers the get HTTP method for the API that I'm defining here. So what get means is that I need to request something from the backend, and the backend is supposed to provide me. So in here I will be getting a request and I'm going to be sending a response. Okay, so this particular aspect is called middleware, which you will understand in just a moment, but you need to pay attention to this get keyword. So get is one of the HTTP methods, and there are a few other methods such as post, put, delete, and update. We're going to be dealing a lot with get, post, and delete, even update, which collectively together are called CRUD applications, which is create, read, and update and delete. Okay, getting back to this code, after we have selected app.get, within this method we have defined a endpoint. So this particular / is called an endpoint, which is supposed to be root here because it will be localhost 3000 and root. Okay, and if I were to be selecting any different endpoint here, so if I were to talk v1, that is for version 1, this would be the particular endpoint, localhost port 3000 and /v1 / and we pass in the callback function with request and response. In response here, I'm just sending in, let me remove this, I'm just sending in hello world because we are not doing anything important right now. We will expand on this code in just a moment, but I'm just going to be sending a response of hello world. So whenever I call in this method, this endpoint, it will send a response of hello world. So let me quickly open up Postman and show this to you real quick. We will be covering Postman in project 2, so you don't have to worry about Postman just yet. I'm just going to show you the response that this application sends. So I'm going to be using the same port that is running on, that is 3000. So if you notice, the URL here is http:// localhost 3000, and the request I'm going to be sending is get. So I'm just going to send, and it gives me an error because I think I'm sending in a body as well. You don't need to send in a body. Alright, it says send is not defined. Okay, let me go back to the code. Alright, so I debugged here and I was supposed to send none in the body parameter, so that's why I was getting an error, but all good now. I'm getting hello world as response. Okay, so that is perfect. Let me go back to the code again. So what is happening here is the application is listening on port. So this is starting the server, a server instance on port 3000. And on port 3000, if I press in, or if I send in the data at the root endpoint, it is, or I'm calling and on root endpoint, it is responding with whatever I send in response. So let's say if this was v1 for version 1, if I save this, close this and run this again, or let me add this, let me make some changes here as well. So let me say hello world from version 1. Save this, close this, and if I send this, I'm going to get a 404 error because this endpoint now does not exist. Okay, so I'm getting an error and the error code is 404. But if I send here as v1, I'm going to get a response of hello world from version 1. Okay, so this is an example of working server. Perfect. And the HTTP method in this case we used was the get method. We'll be covering the other methods as we move ahead. Alright, scaffolding. Scaffolding is a easier way of creating a skeleton for the web application. Okay, so the best way of using a scaffold, and I don't recommend using scaffolding in the beginning of your career in ExpressJS, but as soon as you get comfortable with ExpressJS and if you start working on multiple projects, that's when I would recommend using scaffolding tools. And one of the most popular scaffolding tools is actually provided on ExpressJS's own website. It's called Express Generator. So if you go to expressjs.com and you select getting started and select Express Generator, it gives you an application, it gives you a tool that actually creates a application skeleton. Okay, so I'm going to be using this right here and I'm going to be installing Express Generator globally. So let me close this, expand on this, make some space, paste this. So now if you notice here, it is going to create this tool globally. Okay, so if I press enter, it is going to create globally, and it gave me an error saying that permission denied. Okay, yeah, so I think I have some issues with installing packages globally for some time now. This is something wrong with my Mac. There's nothing wrong with the Express Generator. But what this is going to do is this is going to create the generator toolset, and in which we can quickly create an application. So let me try this, npx instead of npm. Alright, so it's saying, alright, perfect. Alright, so it created a Express file real quick, and if you notice here now, it has created a scaffold for my first application. Okay, so it created a few it included a few dependencies that it thinks are most commonly used. If I look at package.json, it installed a whole lot of dependencies, including Express, HTTP errors, Jade, Morgan, debug, and cookie parser. We're going to be looking at some of these, but not all of them. Since this course is mostly focused on Express and MongoDB, we are not going to be looking at all of these. But this is one of the easiest way of scaffolding an application and reusing it again and again. All right, so let's move back. So we did the scaffolding just a moment ago, and in here we have the scaffold ready for application. All we have to do is go in here and add our application logic. We can just define roots as well. It created some default roots. We're going to be looking at routes as we move ahead. Alright, let's look at middleware. So middlewares, as name suggests, middlewares come in middle of something. So in this case, they come in the middle of request and response cycle. Middleware has access to request and response objects, and they can access the next function of request and response cycle as well. Few of the most important tasks for middleware are to execute any code, make changes to request and response objects, and end the request and response cycle, and also call the next middleware in the stack. Okay, so there are different types of middlewares, and we actually wrote a small middleware before. I'm going to explain to you in a moment, but let me quickly explain the different types of Express middlewares that are present. So the first one is the application level middleware, where we use app.use. We have the router level middlewares, we have built-in middlewares, we have error handling middlewares, and some third-party middlewares as well. Okay, so let's quickly jump to the code that we just wrote. Alright, so here, let me go to the code that we wrote, not the code that they wrote. Okay, alright, so in here we have a middleware function call. Okay, so in here we have the HTTP method for which the middleware function applies, the path or the route for which the middleware function applies, and this right here is the middleware function, okay, in which we have the callback argument. So here is the HTTP request argument for the middleware function called by REQ, that is request by convention. We have the response, and if we wanted to call the next middleware in the middleware stack, it would be the next. Okay, so let's quickly write a middleware of our own and understand this in detail. Okay, so let me quickly create a new file here. Let me just close this and create this file as middleware.js. In here I'm going to create the Express application, so I'll just say require Express, and I'm going to initialize this, so I'll say var app equals Express. Okay, so I'm going to create a logger which console.logs values, so I'll say var my logger equals function in which I'll have request, like I discussed before, response, and next. Alright, in here I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say logged. Okay, now I'm going to use this my logger. Okay, so I'm going to use application level middleware. The way we use application level middleware is by using app.use. So since this is within the application, so I'll just say my logger. And I'm going to call the same hello.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
Middleware. So I'll say hash function request.response. In here I'll say response.send hello world. And I just start the server, so I'll just say app.listen. And I'm going to just start it on port 3000. Alright, I'm just going to say node middleware.js. Okay, so the application started. I just don't have added, I haven't added the console.log here, but the application has started without any errors. Alright, and we don't need this v1. And make sure that I'm not sending anything. Alright, perfect. So if I send here and if I go back, it gives me a result of logged. Okay, so every time the app receives a request, it is going to print the message logged onto the terminal. Okay. In order for middleware loading is important. Okay, so the middleware functions that are loaded first are also executed first. So if my logger is loaded after the route to the root path, the request never reaches and the app does not print logged, because the route handler of the root path terminates the request response cycle. Alright, so that's what middlewares are. Now let's look at routing. Routing. So what is routing? Routing defines the way in which client requests are handled by the application endpoints. There are two ways to implement routing in Node.js. First is by using a framework, and second one is without using a framework. Node.js has many frameworks to help you to get your server up and running, but we're going to focus ExpressJS for now. So routing with Express and Node. Let's switch back to the code and you will come back to the slides in just a moment. So routing definition takes the following structure. We have the application instance. In this case it's the Express application, and the method, as well as the first parameter is the path and the second parameter is the handler. So method is an HTTP request method that is supposed to be defined in a lowercase. So if you remember what HTTP methods are, we spoke about this a few sessions back. Some of the examples are get, post, put, update, and delete. Path is the path on the server, and handler is the function executed when the route is matched. So let's look at the following code here. This is our hello world code that we wrote a few moments ago. I just picked this specific aspect to explain the routing. So in here we are following the same structure. We have the app, that is the instance of the Express. Then we have the HTTP method, in which our case it's get, because since we want to get information from the server. Then we have the path, that is the root path, that is the root of the application. And the next one is the handler function. So this is the callback function that we have written. So in this case, what we are doing is, once we get the request and response, we're handling that, and we are just sending in the response as hello world. We can create a post request on the root router as well. So here is a small example of that. It's similar to what we have typed in here. but in this case, instead of requesting using the requesting for the HTTP GET, we are requesting for the HTTP POST, in which we can send additional information to the back of the server. So POST is usually used when you want to send something to the server. So in this case, once we make a request, the response will be got a POST request. Okay, these routing methods specify a callback function. This is also an handler function when the application receives the request to the specified route and HTTP method. So in other words, the application listens for the request that match the specified routes and methods. When it detects a match, it calls a specific callback function. So we can keep the callback function separate, and we can just we can define the callback function separately, and we can just call them here. That is also perfectly valid. In fact, the routing method can have more than one callback function, such as arguments. With multiple callback functions, it is important to provide the next as an argument to the callback, and then call the next function within the body of a function and hand off the control to the next callback. So in order to do that, let's quickly look at the code. So I'm going to just comment this out, the whole thing out. And I'm going to type in new code here. So if you remember, we defined the Express application. So let's first get Express involved. So we'll say var Express. We'll create an instance of Express application. I'll say var app equals Express. Now we will define the get method, so I'll just type in a comment so that we know what we're doing here. I'll say app.get. We'll have the root, and we will have the callback function. So this is request response. Alright, so we don't need this. Okay, great. And I'm going to just send in a response. Alright, that's fine. Alright, I'm going to type in the post method as well. So I'm just going to copy this to save some time. And instead of get, we are going to say post, and here we're going to say post. We'll say post request received for the home page. Okay, there's one other way you can incorporate all of the HTTP methods, which we didn't discuss, but I'm going to show you here, is the app.all. So in here the server can accept all of the requests on this specific endpoint. So we have to guard this kind of endpoint. It's not safe. So let me just say let's say secret. Response, and I will say console.log accessing the secret section. Alright, and I'll just say app.listen, and we'll listen on port 3000. Alright, perfect. Let me see if I have everything in place. Okay, so I think it looks fine. Let me just go ahead and run this. Alright, let me switch back to the Postman. Alright, in here we have the get. Okay, let me make sure I'm not sending anything. All right, perfect. All right, so we got a response back. It says get request received for the home page. That's what we had typed in. Now let's work with the post. So instead of get, I'm going to say post, and it says post request received for the home page. So this is expected behavior. That's what we expect. Now in here we are listening for all of the methods. So I'm going to say all methods, and if you notice here the endpoint is secret. Okay, so I'm just going to say secret, and I'm going to send it. Okay, I got an error. Let me see what the error is. Oh, okay, I logged it. I did not send it, so that's good. Let me send a response as well. I made changes to the code, so I'm going to stop this application server and start it again. And I'm going to send. Alright, it says you're accessing the secret section. Now it can take all of the requests, all of the HTTP methods. So we can access the secret on the secret route, root secret route, and we are accessing it on all of the HTTP methods. So if I say put, I can access it. If I say patch, I can access it. If I say delete, I can access it. All right, so that's routing. I think we have completed the routing section, so let's move on to the slides. All right, database connectivity. So we will cover database connectivity and how to use it with your Express application in the next session in detail. So this will just be an introduction. We have a complete session where we will learn how to use MongoDB and how to set it up and how to use it with our existing Node.js application. Okay, so this will be just an introduction. Adding the capability to connect databases to Express applications is just a matter of loading the appropriate Node.js driver. And if you go to the npmjs.org, where you can find multiple Node.js, multiple database modules that connect with Node.js. Okay, so let's actually see a code that I have written. Again, we will work on the code in the next session, and obviously in the all of the 3 projects where we will work with the MongoDB database. But this is just a quick introduction of how we can use the drivers that MongoDB has on the npmjs.org. Okay, so what I have done here is I have installed MongoDB module, and I have imported here in my db.js file. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm just saying Mongo client. I'm just getting the one object called Mongo client from this, and I'm going to connect it to a path that I have. So in here, if you notice here, the URL for this path, it's MongoDB :/localhost 27017. All right, so in here, if you notice the animals, that is the name of the database. So I have the database declared, and I'm accessing the client.db, which is animals. And from within that database, I'm accessing the collection called mammals. And I'm trying to find something. I'm actually finding all of the mammals that are existing in the collection, and I'm logging them out. All right, so we will actually code in the next section for this, but this is just a quick overview of what we can do. Now, if we move to the expressjs.com and look under the guide for database integration, we can see all the possible Node.js modules that we can get for different databases. So we have one for Cassandra, Couchbase, CouchDB, LevelDB, MySQL, MongoDB, Neo4j, and so on. So we'll be covering MongoDB in the next session, and we'll also be working on a project where we'll be covering MySQL. All you have to do is click on MongoDB And this is the very simplest explanation that we can get. So all we do is npm install MongoDB and be connected to our local MongoDB instance. We haven't yet created a local MongoDB instance, and that is why I'm not walking through this code. But we will definitely cover this in the next session. All right. So that covers the database connectivity, and I'll see you in the next.
If you have enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Chapter. Take care. So, error handling. It's important to ensure that Express catches all errors that occur while running route handlers and middlewares. Errors that occur in synchronous code inside route handlers and middlewares require no extra work. If synchronous code throws an error, then Express will catch it and process it. So, for example, let me switch back to the Visual Studio Code. In here, here's an example of a simple error. So I have app.get. If there is an error, I'm just going to invoke this throw new error, inside which I'm going to type in my error message. So in here, I'm just saying broken, and this is the error that Express will catch on its own. For the errors returned from asynchronous functions invoked by route handlers and middlewares, we must pass them to the next function, where Express will catch and process them. So for example, let's write our code, and let me show you real quick. So I'm just going to first of all comment this out, make some space here, and in here let's say var express equals require express, initialize the app, and in here I'm just going to type in get, add the handler, request, response, and next. Notice here I've added next, since we're going to be handling the error. Now I'm going to be using the file system. Okay, so I'll just say fs dot read file. Okay, so this was I think this was added directly by Visual Studio Code. We don't need this at the moment, so I'm just going to say read file, and I'm just going to give it a dummy path. So I'll say file okay, add a handler, in here let's handle the error first. So I'm just going to say error, and if it's an error I'm just going to add it to the next handler. So I'm just going to say error, and this will be actually be passed on to Express. Alright, and else, I mean, you know what to do with else. It's going to say response.send and data. Alright, perfect. I'm just going to say app.listen 3000. Alright, I'm just going to run it. And I'm going to send a get request. Alright, so I got an error here. Oh, okay, it is giving me that fs is not defined. Did I not define the file system? Let me see. Oh, okay, so let me quickly define the file system. So fs equals require fs, Alright, now let me close this, clear this out, and run this again. Go back to the Postman and send the request. Alright, so here this error was thrown directly by Express. So what we did here is that we didn't handle the error ourselves. We just passed it on to the Express's event handler and allowed it to handle it. So Express actually comes with built-in error handler that takes care of any errors that might be encountered in the app. This default error handling middleware function is added at the end of the middleware function. So if you pass an error to the next and you do not handle it in custom error handler, it will be handled by the built-in error handler that the Express provides. The error will be written to the client with a stack trace. A stack trace is not included in the production environment, so we have to be sure that we turn on the production environment if we want to deploy the application and we want to track the errors. Express default error handlers will set the HTTP status to 500. So if you notice here, it is set to 500, and it will send a text response to the requester, and it will log the response in the console. So we got a text response here, and we got a log response in the console. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is writing the error handlers ourselves. Okay, so writing the custom error handlers. So I'm going to give you a short example here in just a moment, but we have to first understand the Express error handler takes in 4 arguments. So those 4 arguments are error. Okay, let me comment this out so that IntelliSense does not mess this up. So error, request, response, and next. So they must be placed in after all the middlewares and routes. Express will stop using its default error handler once you create a custom error handler. To handle an error, you need to communicate with the front end that's requesting the endpoint. This means we need to send over the valid HTTP response like Express did here with its 500 error status code, and also send a valid response. Okay, so for an example, let's say if you were to write an example here, the custom error handler would look something like this. Alright, so we would say app.use, and inside here, like I said, we need error, request, response, and next. So we'll have error, request, response, and next. Alright, now in here we're going to handle it. So let's just say we had a bad request error. Okay, so and the error code that we're going to send for the bad request error is going to be of error 400, of the status 400. So it will be response.status of 400, and we're going to send a valid response as well. Okay, so it'll be just response dot, let's say we send error caused due to bad request. Right, so this is an example of a custom error. Alright, so let's move back to the slides. Okay, so I think we are at the end of this session. This is good that we have covered the Express in detail. I mean, not that much in detail. We covered the basics, introduction, right enough to get started. But in the next session, we're going to be covering how to integrate Express application with Mongoose and use MongoDB. And we'll be covering both of these in detail and how to use it, how to build your first project using Express and Mongoose in the project sessions. Alright, so in the next session we're going to be covering, like I said, MongoDB. We're going to be covering the basics of NoSQL databases. We'll be doing refresher on promises. We'll be understanding what is MongoDB and how to install it, and we'll go through the fundamental concepts of MongoDB. Okay, the next thing I want to mention is that we also provide live private coaching sessions. So if you ever get stuck with Express or Mongoose or MongoDB, or just any of your projects that you're working on, you can book a time with me, and I will be sure to explain it to you and help you with any problem that you may have. Okay, I'll speak with you in the next session. Take care. Hey guys, welcome back to Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. My name is Kaustubh Garge, but you can call me KG. In this session, I will be covering session 4, which will be covering MongoDB. Before we begin, let's look at the session outline. In this session, we're going to be covering what NoSQL databases are. We'll be doing a refresher on promises, which is very important when we work with Express applications as well as MongoDB. We will be learning what MongoDB is, why use it, and we will cover the installation and the fundamental concepts of MongoDB database. So before we begin, let's also do a quick recap of what we learned in the previous session. So in the first session, we covered the fundamentals of JavaScript programming. We covered the most important concepts of functional programming, which we will be using often while working with Node.js. In the second session, we understood what Node.js was. We installed Node.js on our systems. We understood what Node Package Manager was, how the package dependency and how the modular code works within the Node.js ecosystem. And we built a simple Node.js application using the packages that we got from NPM. In the third session, we used a framework called ExpressJS to build HTTP RESTful applications, where we learned routing and all the other concepts related to ExpressJS. Not just ExpressJS, but these are the concepts that are very specific to building a web server. In this session, we are going to be covering how to connect that web application server that we have built using ExpressJS to the MongoDB database. Alright, so let's begin. So before we actually understand what MongoDB is, we need to understand what NoSQL databases are. NoSQL or NoSQL is, however you want to call it, is referring to the non-SQL or non-relational databases. So before we understand NoSQL, it is helpful to understand what SQL is, which is a query language used by relational database management systems. Relational databases usually, or not usually, but they always rely on tables, columns, rows, or schemas to organize and retrieve data. In contrast, NoSQL databases do not rely on these structures and use more flexible data models. NoSQL usually can mean not SQL or not only SQL. They are particularly useful in storing unstructured data, which is growing far more rapidly than the structured data in today's rapidly changing digital world, which may not always be good fit for the relational schemas of relational database management systems. One of the common types for unstructured data is user and session data or chat messaging. So if you use any sort of chat messaging, the relational database systems are not that efficient and they don't scale well enough as much as NoSQL database systems can. We can also think the data that we get from IoT devices, the device data, the large object data such as video and images, which are perfect use cases for using NoSQL databases. So there are actually 4 different categories of NoSQL databases. The first one is key value data stores, which uses the key value pair for storing data. The second one is document stores, which we will be working on since MongoDB follows this approach. Document databases typically store self-describing JSON, XML, and BSON data. The third one is wide column stores. Wide column stores are NoSQL databases which store data in tables with rows and columns similar to relational database systems, but the names and formats of these columns can vary from row to row across
Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video.
the table. And finally, the last category of NoSQL databases is graph stores, which are relatively new. Not that new, but they have been implemented. They're beginning to be implemented in various systems, various production systems. The graph database uses graph structures to store, map, and query relationships. All right, so let's move ahead. Okay, so before we jump into MongoDB, let's do a quick refresher on promises. We have actually covered this in the previous session, but still we will do a quick refresher on promises. So promises are very important in JavaScript. Make sure you understand this very thoroughly because you will be using this in advanced JavaScript and especially in various JavaScript frameworks such as Node.js as well as the front-end frameworks such as Angular. Promise is commonly defined as a proxy for a value that will eventually become available. So imagine you're a kid and your dad promises you that he will take you camping next week. So now you don't know if he'll go to the camping. Your dad can take you camping, or he might not take you camping because he might be busy, right? So that's a promise. A promise has 3 states. So let me go back in here real quick and open up the console. So a promise has 3 states. The first is pending. The next one is fulfilled. And the last one is rejected. Okay, so pending is that you don't know if you'll go to camping. Fulfilled means your dad takes you to camping because he's not busy. Okay, the not busy is a condition that we have to check. The rejected, that means your dad does not take you to camping because he's busy, right? So let's write some code for this. Let's codify this. So I'll just clear this console out, and I'll declare a variable to see if dad is busy. So I'll say is dad busy. So currently he's not busy. And let me create a new promise. So this is how you create a new promise. I'll declare a variable, take me camping, and this will either be fulfilled or not fulfilled. Will take me camping, this promise. So I'll say new promise. And inside this we pass in a function. So I'll say function resolve reject. Okay, so just ignore this, I just accidentally pressed enter right here. In this we have to see if dad is busy. So I'll say if dad is busy. So I'll say if dad is not busy, and in here I'm going to, if dad is not busy, then we are going camping, right? So I'll create a object for camping which will have all the information about camping. So I'll say where we are going. So let's say we are going into the state of Wisconsin. The time, say we are going at 10 a.m. The day, say we're going on Sunday, and that is it. Okay, now since dad is not busy, we are definitely going to camping. So I'm just going to resolve this request. That means the request has been fulfilled. So resolve camping. So that means the request has been fulfilled. And if that is busy, then we have to give a reason because that is busy. So I'll just say var reason equals new error. I'm just going to throw an error, and the reason is that is busy. And I'm going to reject this with the reason. So which means we are not going to camping. Okay. So this is how you create a promise. And if I now see if will that take me camping, the promise is resolved because that is not busy, and that's why we're going, right? But what if that is busy? So if I say and I create this again, then I get an error. I get an error saying that is busy, so we are not going camping today. Great. Let's go back. So what is MongoDB? MongoDB is an open source NoSQL database management program. It is a tool that can manage document-oriented information, which is used to store or retrieve information. When we say document-oriented system, where documents are the basic unit of data in MongoDB. The documents are similar to JSON, but we use a variant called binary JSON, which literally stands for BSON. The benefit of using BSON is that it accommodates more data types. Like other NoSQL databases, MongoDB does not require predefined schemas, so it can store any sort of unstructured data, which gives us the flexibility to create any number of fields in the document, making it easier to scale these databases compared to the relational database management systems. So here is a slide explaining what MongoDB is, which I already discussed. Moving on to the next slide, why use MongoDB? There are 4 reasons that I can give you why we should use MongoDBs. The first one is that it supports dynamic schemas. The MongoDB's dynamic schema provides a simple way of implementing changes as the application requirements change. These changes can be made to the database without affecting the existing data or application code without incurring any downtime. So consider a rapid application development program that your company has undertaken. So for example, before building a specific product, so let's say if you wanted to build a social media application, networking application, you wanted to build a small prototype to test on, let's say, 10 or 20 users, and if you wanted to scale it up gradually from 20 to 200, from 200 to 2000, to do that, the requirements and the functionalities of the underlying application will change rapidly. Okay, so to incorporate these rapid changes, MongoDB is a perfect system because MongoDB's dynamic schema provides a simple way of implementing these changes. This would not be possible or easy in terms of relational databases. This is why MongoDB is much more better. The second reason why we should use MongoDB is the ease of deployment. Since MongoDB was built to work with cloud architectures, the data is localized for queries to ensure performance, okay, regardless of the deployment size. So let's say if your application rests on the cloud architecture, let's say it rests on AWS or Azure or any of these cloud platforms that are scattered across various regions, the way MongoDB is set up, that it can be deployed anywhere within the region, and we can quickly query the data no matter where it rests, no matter in which region it rests. The third reason why we should choose MongoDB is, of course, the ease of scaling. Since we talked about ease of deployment, the next possible evolution with that is a ease of scaling. So MongoDB is designed to allow scaling across server clusters. So as data volumes increase, organizations can simply add more nodes to their clusters, and MongoDB will automatically balance the data in the background. Okay, balance the data seamlessly in the background. The last, or one of the final reasons I think is most important on why we should use MongoDB is the rich querying experience. So MongoDB provides a full query language and primary and secondary indexing as well. And the full text search is somewhat similar to like Google like syntax search. Okay, it is also good for following applications that I think are more important. So one of the most clear examples is product catalogs for e-commerce, sites such as blogs or content management platforms, or anywhere you have to provide real-time analytics and high-speed logging, or if you want to provide geospatial data, or if you want to use ever-evolving applications such as social networking sites. Okay, this is where MongoDB really stands out. The data in the MongoDB has flexible schema, so they do not enforce the document structure by default. This flexibility allows you to data model according to your choices and match to the application that you're building and provide the performance requirements that you need. All right. So moving on to the data model, like I mentioned right now, is that MongoDB's data model makes it easier to store and combine data of any structure. That means it has a flexible schema, and MongoDB has a concept called collections, which we'll see in just a moment, which do not enforce the document structure by default. This allows the flexibility and gives you it actually gives you flexibility to select your choices for data modeling based on the application that you're building. Okay, you can dynamically modify the schema without downtime, so this is very perfectly suitable for rapidly evolving applications. Moving on. So the installation. So let's move on to the installation phase. So before we jump into the installation, make sure you jump on to the mongodb.com and check out their website. You can take a look around. I strongly encourage you to take a look around and look at the different products they have, as well as check out the documentation. We are not going to install MongoDB on our local systems. Instead, we are going to be using something called MongoDB Atlas, which is a fully managed cloud MongoDB service. The reason why I'm choosing to use MongoDB Atlas is because we don't have to make technical or any sort of complicated changes to your local system, and we will just understand how to set up MongoDB on the cloud, since it is most suitable for using it on a cloud architecture. And we will connect directly to the cloud and work over there. So let's begin by creating a free account. I already have a free account, but I'm going to be helping you walk you through it. So in here, when you get to the sign up page, you can enter a company. It's optional, but you can enter any fictional company, it's fine. The next step is you can say that I'm learning MongoDB. Enter your work email address. So I'm just going to say my email address, and I will sign up, and I'll be right back. So after I entered all my information, it takes me to the configuration page. Over here, we are going to be using the free tier on which we'll create a cluster. Make sure you choose the shared clusters option. Since it is free, you don't have to put in any sort of credit card information. So I'm going to select the free tier. I'm going to select AWS as cloud provider, and I'm going to select a region that I'm closest to. Okay, the next thing I'm going to select is I'm going to select the cluster tier. All of the default settings are fine. The cluster name, I can select whatever I want, but I'm okay with the default cluster name. I need to make sure that the amount over here is free. It says your monthly estimate is $0 a month.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to add your questions as comments down below.
M0 cluster is idle for experimenting in a limited sandbox. That's what you want to set up. Make sure you set it up with this cluster and you don't pay for any of the production level clusters. So I'm going to go ahead and select create cluster, and it is going to take me some time to create cluster. Okay, so let this get created and I will talk with you soon. Alright, so the cluster got created. So if we look around, the cluster is created, and now we have to load a sample data set. Okay, so I'm going to select load a sample data set, and after we load the sample data set, once it is done, I will select connect over here. And the first thing we need to do is set up the connection security. Okay, since we are doing this in a sandbox environment, we are not really concerned about the security. Of course, we'll be storing some test data, not anything that is sensitive and that is not suitable for a production level system. So I'm going to just say allow access from anywhere, and I'm going to add IP address as 0.0.0.0/0, and I'm going to say that this is public. Alright, now in here I'm going to create a database user that will have access to this project. Okay, so I'm just going to create a test user with a password I'm going to save it, and next thing I'm going to move to the connection method. Alright, so there are different ways we can connect to this application. First is obviously we can connect it using the Mongo shell. The Mongo shell is installed when you install MongoDB on your system. We haven't installed this, so we are not going to be covering the Mongo shell within this course. The next step is you can connect to this cluster by using your application. So for example, if I select this, we can connect using Node.js. We'll get back to connecting to Node.js, but in just a moment, as the data is being loaded on the back side. So let's look at other options while the data gets loaded. The next option is to connect using MongoDB Compass. So we'll be using MongoDB Compass to visualize the data that we add. So head over to a new tab and search MongoDB Compass, and open the first link that says mongodb.com with products and Compass. Select on it, and you can see and understand why we use MongoDB Compass. It's much more easier to have a look at your data and run very short queries to extract any piece of information you want from the database. So I'm going to be just selecting the download button at the very end, and I'm going to be selecting the version that is specific to my platform. Now I already have MongoDB Compass installed on my computer, so I'm not going to be installing it, but make sure you install the version appropriate for your platform. Let me go back and see if the cluster has been created and the dataset has been loaded. So I get here that the sample data set has been loaded. Access it in Data Explorer by clicking Collections button or with a Mongo shell. So let's click the collections button and see the sample data set that has been loaded. So if you notice here, within this data set, we have 8 databases and 21 collections. So on the left hand side over here, you have the databases. So the database over here is saying sample underscore Airbnb, and within it we have a collection called listings and reviews. Okay, so if I look at listings and reviews, I get the title, I get the collection size, I get the total number of documents that are available within this collection. And if I scroll down, I get to see the sample documents within the collection. So if you notice here, it is giving me the data that is very specific to Airbnb listing. Okay, so if you notice, we have an ID, we have listing URL, we have name, summary, space, description, neighborhood overview, etc., etc., etc. And you have about 5,000 of these documents within this collection. Okay, if you look at the other databases, we have this sample analytics database which has multiple collections. So if I select the account collection, we have the collection size of about 218 kilobytes with the total documents of 1746. And if I scroll down, I can see that the accounts have ID, the account ID, the limit, and the products. Okay, so this is sample analytics. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a database of our own and connect it using a Node.js application. So let's create the database and connect it using Node.js application, and then we can understand the fundamentals of MongoDB. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Hey guys, welcome back to codingbootcamps.com. This is Introduction to Node.js, ExpressJS, and MongoDB. I'm very excited that you have completed this course, and I wish you all the best on building web applications, the API applications using ExpressJS, Node.js, and MongoDB. I think you have covered the most fundamental aspects of the mean stack that I was talking about. So the mean stack is Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node. So apart from Angular, you have covered all of the three technologies. So kudos. In this course, we covered the basic refresher and installation. So the refresher was about the fundamental concepts of JavaScript. So we covered the core concepts, including the functions, arrays, and how to manipulate the data, as well as installation of Node.js on our local systems. We understood the introduction to Node.js by understanding what Node.js is, and by understanding what Node Package Manager is, and how you can have different package dependencies within your application. After which we covered the framework of Node.js, which is ExpressJS, in which we understood the routing, the middlewares, and how to create database connectivity, and how to make sure we handle the errors correctly. After which we learned how to set up MongoDB on the cloud service that MongoDB provides, which is called MongoDB Atlas, and we connected that application, that cloud application, to our Express application, which was very fun to do that, to be honest. It's very interesting that you have built a cloud application connection with your local system, right? And you're accessing the data that is actually stored in the cloud. So that was pretty exciting. And we implemented this by working on some projects. So the first project we built was a simple RESTful API application, which was built using Express and MongoDB. So we created a personal record for a company, and where we actually stored the information in the database, and we retrieved that information back. Okay, in the project 2, we built a user authentication system using MongoDB as well as ExpressJS. And in the third project, we implemented the same user authentication system, but with ExpressJS and SQL. So congratulations on having this class finished successfully, and I hope you take the front-end classes, most especially the Angular and React classes, so that you are pretty well versed with the mean stack or the merge stack. Okay, so that way you can claim to be a full stack web developer, and there are a lot of job openings for full stack web developer at the moment. There have been for quite some time, and it is very hard to find good full stack web developers, and you can be one of them. Make sure you follow us on social media platforms to get updates on my latest classes as well as other classes. So thank you and have a good day.